Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Melton Thorpe, and welcome to our event, Pathway to Becoming a Leader. I will first like to thank the Center for Career and Engagement and Internships Office of Student Development and Leadership. A little about myself, I am a junior at Queens College, and I'm currently an economics major. I would also like to thank our speakers for today, Mr. Richard Celestion and Ms. Annie Popola. And first, I would like to introduce our first speaker, my former teacher in Political Science 101, Mr. Richard Celestion. He is a graduate of Queens College and the City University of New York School of Law. While being at CUNY Law, he focused his studies on criminal justice and juvenile justice. Prior to entering law school and since becoming an attorney, he directed his work towards underrepresented and at-risk youth via the non-for-profit sector with alternate to detention programs in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and Queens. He offers his knowledge and insight in the juvenile and criminal justice area by participating in panel discussions, such as this one, conducting workshops throughout New York City addressing issues concerned that affect community of colors. Primarily the rising arrest and incarceration rates of youth of color. In addition to working with youth involved in juvenile and criminal justice system, Mr. Celestion created a limited liability corporation, Richard Celestion Consulting Group, LLC, for the purposes of developing and providing legal skills development, self-awareness, youth engagement, and consequential thinking programs to elementary, middle, and high school students in New York City and Long Island areas. Under the LLC, Richard operates the Young Debaters Program, which has been implemented in over 70 schools, focusing on teaching the skills behind debate and oral advocacy. Mr. Celestion self-publicized his first book entitled The Hard Facts About Soft Skills in 2018. Targeting pre- and young professionals, the book focuses on soft skills needed to work successfully in navigating the program world, the professional world. These skills include networking, resume development, personal branding, and professional handshakes. Richard had also published Embracing Adversity, Finding Power, Strength in Life's Most Challenging Times, in which a contributing author in the analogy, Our Stories, Our Voices, Black Men Speak Their Truth. He aims to publish additional books in the future. Additionally, Richard Celestion served on the board of the CUNY School of Law, as well as various community-based organizations, acts as a consultant for several organizations seeking to develop youth-based programs with the community practicing law, a solo practitioner, and the adjunct professor at Queens College. And without further ado, I would like Mr. Celestion to have a brief bio about himself.
So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much, Melton. I appreciate the great introduction. I'm very thankful to Queens College for the opportunity to take part in what is truly a powerful and empowering event. I hope to share some additional insight in terms of my experiences as an attorney, the obstacles that I faced in an attorney, as well as give some advice and insight for anybody listening who is considering an area of the law, considering going to law school, considering becoming an attorney, or what to do even with a JD degree if they don't want to practice. So hopefully I can provide some information. Again, I'm thankful for the space and certainly encourage everybody who's watching to please take advantage and ask some questions that are definitely going to benefit you in terms of the next stages in your life. So thank you again, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. For our second speaker, Annie Pablo is a third-year student at Columbia Law School. Born and raised in Queens, New York, Annie gained accepted to the Prep for Prep, an educational enrichment program that provides places high-performing New York City students in top private schools across the city throughout the Northeast. Annie went on to attend Harvard University, where she double majored in government and sociology. At Harvard, she was most active in the Christian Key Society, a campus tour guide group, and the Association of Black Harvard Women, which is ultimately served as the president during her junior year. After completing her undergrad study, Annie moved back to New York, worked as a seventh grade history teacher at a charter school located in East Harlem for 2 years before commencing her studies at Columbia Law School. At Columbia, Annie has served on the board of Black Law Student Association as an editor on the Columbia Law Review. She has plans to work on general litigations associate at a large New York corporate law firm as her graduation in May. In her free time, Annie runs a personal blog titled Any Given Sunday, where she shares more about her favorites in beauty, experience in law school, and reflection on life. And without further ado, I would like to invite Annie to have a brief summary about herself.
Thank you so much, Milton. And hello, everyone. Happy Black History Month. I'm so excited to be here and share a little bit more about my journey to and through law school. A lot of information was already covered in the bio, but I just wanted to once again reiterate how excited I am to be here and to engage in discussion about just making it through law school. So I'm looking forward to this discussion and to sharing more about my journey and experience.
Thank you, Annie. And if you guys have any questions, please put it in the comments. I will probably see your question. And without further ado, first, my questions. I thought a lot about what people want to know in becoming a lawyer. So my first question to Richard will be, what made you want to become a lawyer or study law?
So yeah, my reasoning for wanting to become a lawyer kind of evolved as my experience in education evolved. When I was younger, I was interested in the law because my mother was a huge fan of, Matlock, which we don't need to talk about, but that's an old school like lawyer show, and she was a huge fan of it, and definitely encouraged me to consider, that area, and I enjoyed it. I was a victim of bullying as a young age. And I always saw the profession of lawyers as being those people, or the way that I envisioned it is being people who stood up and spoke for people who were in a position that were voiceless or needed the support of individuals who stood behind their degree and was able to help them in difficult situations. As I started to kind of go through, schooling and high school and college, I started to realize that I really enjoyed debating. Even though I was never really part of a debate team, I really enjoyed going back and forth with people in terms of different topics. And, the legal profession, if we had to really kind of summarize it briefly, like lawyers essentially get paid to argue. And so I was like, this is just a brilliant profession. It's perfect for me. And now I can tell you that, the driving force behind being an attorney is, first off, obviously trying to give back and help individuals in need as much as humanly possible. But I also spend a lot of time in my work in education encouraging young people who are not as exposed to lawyers and what lawyers did at a young age. I go and I speak to young people to encourage them to consider becoming lawyers, especially young boys and girls of color, considering that this profession is so poorly represented by Black and brown men and women. So those are my evolving reasons why I ultimately decided to become a lawyer.
That's amazing. Your experience helped you to know what you wanted to become in the future. Now, I'll repeat the question. What made you want to become a lawyer or study law? So I push that question in.
Yeah, so for me, I was also like the kid who, wanted to grow up and work in government and saw TV shows where, people were lawyers and were arguing and thought, that's exactly what I want to do. So as a child, I had that sense, but I really appreciate the fact that as I got older, I gave myself the room to really think about whether that was something that I wanted to pursue. It's easy to see something on TV and get an impression of it, or to tell someone that's what you want to be when you grow up and stick to it because that was what you said. But I think it's even more important to think about, like, as you grow and evolve, like, how do your career aspirations grow and evolve, and do they stay the same? And so when I went to college, I studied government. I thought I was going to do the traditional thing and study government and economics because, that's what, if you want to go into politics, the traditional route would be, go to college, study gov and econ, and then, go to law school and then, figure it out from there. And I got to college and I didn't even take econ, like the first econ class. So that was something that I was like, this is not something that I want to do. And I'm sticking to this impression or idea of what I think this path is supposed to look like for me. And it shouldn't be that way. So I studied government, which is basically political science. And I stumbled into a sociology class that a friend had, was really interested in, and it was the sociology of housing. And I thought it was incredibly fascinating to me, thinking about how buildings are built and how that impacts relations in the community, and the implications that has specifically on communities of color who have been marginalized literally by physical buildings and the way that they are built. And even though it was a sociology class, I found myself thinking about, most importantly, the laws that made this the way that they were. And so that was once again, a reminder of, oh, you're still interested in it. And it doesn't necessarily look like taking a traditional pre-law class, but your mind is still oriented towards how are the laws set up in a way that put people at an advantage and put other people who I care about most at a disadvantage. So I had still the ideas and the plans to attend law school. I took some time off after college, and decided to teach. And it was funny because I, had pursued a lot of jobs working at law firms, because I thought that was once again, I thought that's what you're supposed to do. And ultimately decided to teach because I knew it would be something that if I went to law school, would probably be the last time that I would have an experience like that. And I knew that I love working with kids and I love being able to mentor youth. And I knew the importance of having Black teachers, especially in New York City, especially at charter schools. So I did that and opted not to work at a law firm, which I am incredibly grateful for. It was the most rewarding experience. But working as a 7th grade history teacher still, the content that I was teaching was about, we started the year at the Civil War, and there were tons of questions throughout the year just about the way the laws were, the way they worked. So when we spoke about Reconstruction, talking about its failures and how legislation and policy fell through and all of those things. And so even my students at that point were telling me oh, Ms. Papula, you should go think about law school, which they didn't have to tell me. I still felt it within me that I really just wanted to be able to advocate for people, to really push back and challenge the ways that laws have marginalized communities. And so that pretty much was what led me to law school. And I now understand that I feel like a running theme of what I've been saying is, this is what I thought the path was supposed to look like for me, or this is what I thought I was supposed to do. And I think it's really interesting how being in law school has allowed me to expand my understanding of what it means to help people in different ways. Whether that, that at some point in life that looked like me being a teacher. In law school, that's looked like me also being on the immigrant rights clinic and helping a client through her asylum case. And now I've really just kept my eye open to the different ways that I want to, use my law degree to specifically help Black people, Black women, people of color. So I'm still very grateful that I made the decision to go to law school.
Thank you for sharing your experience about, being like not going the traditional route. Well, me being in college, I felt like the traditional route was political science, then law school. But, me being in political science, when Professor Richard Celestion was my teacher, he told me that you could do econ, but you can also go to law school. So that was, that helped me a lot. My second question is, what was your motivation through going to law school or college, whichever one you want to answer?
So again, I'm I don't know if it's a lawyer thing, but it's a two-part answer to that. One, which I think is something I'm sure a lot of people understand. So my number one motivation was my parents. My father I did not come from money. My parents were born and raised in Jamaica, Queens. My father worked 3 jobs in order to provide, food and clothing for all of us. My mother was a stay-at-home mom who made sure that, we avoided the drug dealers and stayed out of trouble and, didn't get into, any trouble while we were, growing up and going to school. And they poured so much of themselves into their children, and that I felt that the greatest return on their investment that I could possibly give them was my JD degree. And so that was, during those moments in law school where I was asking myself, like, why am I punishing myself like this? I remembered my parents, and I would just envision how proud they would be on the day that I walked that stage. My second motivation, which is a little bit more personal, is that, when I was in high school, I endured a lot of health issues. I nearly lost my life several times while dealing with some traumatic, health problems that I really didn't understand, and my parents didn't understand. But, thankfully, I was able to come through that. And in the process of coming through that, I realized that, if I was going to make it through this, then that was a clear indication that I had a much greater purpose in this life, and that I needed to make an impact, and I was here to make an impact. I personally believe that, next to a medical degree, there is no degree that is more powerful than a JD. And I feel like kind of with Spider-Man, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And I wanted that power. I wanted to be in a position to call myself, a lawyer and an attorney. And I wanted to do so primarily knowing that once I reached that point, that I could literally pour myself into giving back and helping and supporting and empowering and inspiring as many people as I possibly could through education, through my legal practice, through speaking, through mentoring, and in any and all capacities that I could possibly think or be provided an opportunity to take part in. So those are really my two main driving forces. And to be honest with you, they continue to be my driving force, even now, well beyond law school.
Next, Annie, can you also answer the question of what was your motivation throughout law school or college, whichever one?
Yeah, I would say my motivation for those are pretty similar in the sense, my motivation to and through college still remains my motivation to and through law school. And that really stems back to just like understanding the idea that there is like a great need for lawyers who are who have empathy, for lawyers who have compassion, for lawyers who understand different experiences, and really thinking about the fact that there are so many people out there. Like for me, and this also goes back to why I wanted to be a lawyer and just the way I thought. Like it seems like everything that you want to do, no matter what, like requires some question about the law or requires a lawyer in some way, right? Like when we're thinking about building a building, like there are rules and laws that govern that. not. When we're thinking about giving out vaccines in the middle of a pandemic, right, there are issues about patents and who owns that and who can give that out. So it's really just the idea of like, there's always a need for lawyers, and there's always a need for lawyers who bring the perspective that we bring as people of color, because if we aren't there, like the reality is we aren't getting looked out for. And so really for me, a huge motivation has just been like, having the opportunity and the honor to like fulfill a need for our community and to fulfill a need at large for the profession of lawyers. So that's a huge part of my motivation. Of course, my family, of course, my community, of course, joining the ranks of people who have come before and like made a whole ton of sacrifices to even, get through into college and law school definitely contribute to that. But those are my main motivations.
I would like to thank you guys for those answers, because it's like putting yourself in that space, being able to say, "Oh, I know someone as a Black lawyer," because a lot of times when we look at shows, we see typical white person in those spaces. But seeing you guys going through law school and going through all these different traumatic events and still being able to prosper, and Annie being graduating next May to be a lawyer, that's incredible. So the third question, what I was thinking was, what is something that you wish you knew before going to law school, like a typical misconception? Richard.
Yeah, so definitely, and I think you touched on it. So I'll, in terms of just understanding what the expectations are when you're applying to law school, I was one of those people who essentially believed you had to major in political science in order to go to law school. And I didn't find out until my third year that that wasn't the case. And to make myself more marketable, I took on a second major of psychology. But I think that one of the greatest lessons that I think that I learned or wish I knew before going to law school was how humble law school would actually make me, right? So it's funny because I was somebody who I've always been able to kind of coast through education, not because I feel like I'm brilliant, but it's like I put in, enough effort to kind of like do well. And I was like, all right, I did it. I'm good. I'm happy. I got good grades. It's all right. And so going to law school, I was like, all right, law school's a little bit harder. That's fine. So I'll go from like a 6 to an 8 and, it'll be easy, a piece of cake. And that first semester of law school was by far the most humbling experience that I've ever had in my entire life. You essentially have to learn how to read and write all over again. You're learning a brand new language. You're learning a whole new, a different approach towards applying that language. And I saw a lot of people who came in with a bigger chip on their shoulder. People who were journalists, people who graduated and, top of their class in undergrad. And they kind of came in with this mentality of like, oh yeah, this is, law school is just the same thing. It's just a little bit more studying. And law school is one of those things where I tell people all the time that one of the best pieces of advice I can give going into law school is to really humble yourself and understand that everything you've done up until that point lays a foundation, but you're rebuilding that foundation and then building once you get to law school. So be prepared to be humbled, be prepared to feel like you don't know as much as you think you know, and just take it with a grain of salt, take it with a good chin, and just kind of build from there.
Wow, I think I got that humbling experience from Bio 101 in Queens College. I went in, I was like, oh, this is gonna be easy. Oh, you gotta study for 3 hours. I was like, oh. But on to Annie. What would you like? What was something you would wish you knew before going into law school?
Yeah, so I would say I knew. So my answer for this, and this kind of relates to what Richard was just saying in terms of how humbling the experience is. I wish I knew, and I'll caveat this, like how qualified I still was, despite all of that. And I knew that, and this is why I give the caveat, I knew that, but I hadn't internalized it. And I'm someone who, like, I like to think of myself as pretty confident. Like, I've had challenging academic experiences before. And so even though I, like, you know, mentally at the forefront of my mind was like, oh, I'm still qualified, I'm still qualified, like those experiences really humble you, and really get at you in a way that you don't expect, in terms of like reducing your confidence, making it feel like you shouldn't ask a question or don't want to speak up in class, or giving you crippling anxiety before cold calls and things like that. And so I really wish I knew more ways to go back to that home base of reminding myself of, like, regardless of what the grades say, regardless of how that cold call went, regardless of what it seems like other people are doing to study or all of those things, like, you are incredibly qualified, because there are going to be a lot of opportunities in law school. I think that's what it is. I didn't really fully understand like how many opportunities in law school there were for you to feel like you just didn't have your stuff together or didn't know what you were doing. And in a lot of ways, no one knows what they're doing. So that's like a part of the process. And that's a thing to embrace. But it is important to really have a firm grip on, like, regardless, I'm qualified, I'm here, I'm doing this, not only just because I got accepted here, but like because I know that, and because everything I've done leading up to this point has proven that and shown that. And so I can really rely and rest on that. Still working hard, you know, still with an understanding that it won't come easy, but that it doesn't take away from how I'm meant to be here.
I'm glad you said I'm qualified to be here, because a lot of times us being at these, you know, PWIs, and us being maybe like one of 5 black kids in the classroom, like, how do we know, like, oh, if I raise my hand, what if I say the wrong answer? Does this affect how people view me? And it's important to remember to yourself that, oh, I am still qualified to be here. Although I might have gotten a C on this test, I'm still qualified to be here. And I do that all the time, you know, being at Queens College. And I might be the only black kid in the economics class, but I'm still saying to myself, oh, I am qualified to be here. This might be similar to the last question, but my fourth question is, what would you tell your college self if you could go back in time? You know, that's not that long, so
I would, I think that, you know, one of the things that I did going into law school, and not that I feel like it was a disadvantage, I just wish I would have done it a little differently, is that all of my experience leading into law school involved working with young people and kids. I was a mentor, I was a tutor, I was a camp counselor, I was a supervising camp counselor, I, you know, volunteered a lot in community organizations. So my entire resume was essentially, you know, it was ideal to become a teacher as opposed to becoming an attorney. And I think I took that passion of education and I found a way to tap into it as an attorney where I can do both. But I think that the one thing that I would advise myself, if I could go back and speak to myself in college, would be to try to get a little bit of experience in something legal, right? Whether it's to volunteer or to do an internship in a law office, just to get a better sense of what it is that I knew that I was interested in, what it is that I knew that I liked. And I think a lot of this was just based on, and again, this is, you know, me personally in my experience, like walking into law school and meeting people. A lot of people had an idea of what they wanted to do, or took a class and said this was it, or you know, some came in and took multiple classes and changed their mind multiple times. But, you know, I came in and just kind of said, I want to be a lawyer, and really didn't have necessarily a game plan in terms of what I wanted to do, other than I was debating, well, do I want to practice? Do I want to continue to give back to the community and work in not-for-profit organizations? Like, I wasn't 100% sure. So I think that if I had a little bit of more experience going into law school, it may have shaped my experience better. I think I may have been able to contribute a little bit more as a student. I don't necessarily regret that, but that would be the one piece of advice that I would definitely give myself in college now.
Annie, can you also answer the question?
Yes. So I know I spoke a little bit about this, and even though I landed on government and sociology, I think in my true heart of hearts, like, I could have just stuck with sociology. And that would have been enough. And I think I kept on to, the poli sci a little bit for that, like, people, and especially as like, a first gen student too, like, people don't understand, there's a pressure to study certain things because otherwise like family members might look at you like, what is this thing that you're studying? What are you even talking about? And so sociology kind of felt like one of those things because it's just like the first time I'd ever heard about sociology was in college. And so I think one thing I would do is just fully just tell myself, like, you can let go of the government and you will be just fine. And your grades would be all the better for it because you would be so enthusiastic about what you were studying that it would reflect in your grades. So that's one thing. And a second thing I would tell my college self, which I would even still tell my current self, is really to just tap into relationships. And I know networking is not a fun thing, and I'm sure you're getting a lot of preparation and support and networking and things like that. But it is really important at all levels, especially in college. Like, there are people who are getting that experience being able to shadow someone in an office because they're reaching out, cold emailing, or tapping into someone that they know who might know a lawyer or something like that. And that really, really goes a long way. And it's not just because, you never know where someone's going to end up, but it's like also to help you get an understanding of what it's like to be in the profession, and to have that support. Some people go into law school having lawyers in their family, and having someone be able to read over an assignment and to look something over and to push their writing further. And if you don't have that, it might be helpful to have a mentor who is in that position to help you and push that along for you. So I think really thinking about building relationships and looking out for people who might be willing or able to just give you a little bit of that guidance is something that I would tell my college self to think about a little bit more.
I have a follow-up question on that. How big was connections in your journey? Because I know, well, I'm not gonna steal Richard's whole thing, but in class he would always tell us to build connections with your teachers and build connections with your professors. But I never really understood that until I got out of his class. Like, oh, I really do have to talk to this teacher. But can you please explain further about building connection, how it was important to your journey?
Yeah, so I'm even thinking about, so there's the professor aspect, and there's also just the where people end up and how they end up doing things that you especially might want to do in the future. So I think it was sophomore summer or junior summer, I interned at the New York Attorney General's office in the Civil Rights Bureau, and the head of the bureau at the time was Kristen Clark, who had gone also to Harvard and Columbia. So we were similar in that way. And she was someone, who helped me throughout, thinking about the law school process. And now she's also, at the DOJ, heading a division, which is a pretty huge thing. And so just being able to have that, a lot of the people who I worked with in the office that summer as well were pivotal in helping me think about my law school application, even though I was only there for one summer. And even though some of them have since left that position, even most recently now, going to a law firm after law school, we haven't really been able to have the real in-person experience because of COVID. And I've been able to meet people who have said as a Black person, we want you to succeed. And so reach out to this person or talk to this person because they might be able to help you understand the lay of the land. And so those are things that are really important because there's the writing on the wall, or you have to read between the lines in some situations. And so everything's not going to be covered in the manual or the handbook or the instruction guide. And sometimes it's really going to be those conversations, even the ones that we're having right now, even this conversation we're having right now, where people are filling in the gaps of what you wouldn't get otherwise.
Y'all heard it here first. Build those connections. I'm gonna say it again. Build those connections. Well, Richard, also, do you have a story about how connections got you to where you are, or anything connections related?
It's as you mentioned, I'm a very, very, very strong advocate for networking and the power of networking. I don't believe in burning bridges. I think that we develop relationships with people and we maintain those relationships, and we never know when they can actually step in and support us. And I think that the greater wealth of resources that we have, the better position that we're in to succeed. I was able to, get into the law school that I wanted to through the connections I was able to make. My very first job out of law school was actually presented to me because of the connections that I made in law school. It's just so incredibly important to, develop these relationships and to nurture them, to make sure that they are, mutual in a sense. And it's not just, well, I'm just going to reach out to you when I need something or I want something, but also providing them with motivation to want to support you and to want to help you. Those are all incredibly important. I know I am where I am today because of the relationships that I've developed. And this is the reason why, as you mentioned, Melton, that
I think Richard froze, so I'm just reiterate, to build those connections. If he comes back, he could further explain his connections. But on to my next question, and I hope can you guys please leave drop questions in the chat, because after this we will be taking questions from the chat. So on to my next question. What is a common misconception about being a lawyer? Because there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I just wanted to clear those up before any.
Yeah, so I can rally off like a few that come to mind. One we've already spoken about, and the biggest is, that to be a lawyer or to go to law school, that you need to study political science or that you need to be pre-law. What you need are good grades. And so whatever is the best way for you to get good grades, I always say if you study something that you genuinely want to study, it'll probably reflect in your grades. And so study what you truly want to study. There's like no other time in life that you will be able to have as many offerings academically as you do in a college environment. And so really just, take that opportunity. If you want to study English, doing that, you'll be a great writer. If you want to study biology, do what you want to do. There are ways to connect that to the law. So study what you genuinely want to study. Another common misconception, I would say, is the idea that are in courtrooms. A majority of lawyers may not actually be standing up in the courtroom. And so I would say it's really important to get a sense of tapping into those connections and asking people what do what is your job entail as a lawyer, because it does not look the same for everyone. And then the last thing I'll say, a common misconception, specifically about law school, the idea that you maybe even come out of law school knowing how to actually practice law. A lot of it is knowing how to think like a lawyer. A lot of it is grappling with theories and ideas. But a lot of what comes, I feel like what you learn about being a lawyer happens with actual experience, whether it's through clinics, whether it is through internships, externships, all of those things. So I wouldn't just limit your idea or your experience to the classroom or the lectures, because you're going to learn far, far more about being a lawyer in those out of classroom, hands-on learning experiences.
I hope I cleared up a lot of you guys' misconceptions of being a lawyer. Well, Richard, can you also answer the question, what are the common misconceptions about being a lawyer, do you think?
Absolutely. And I definitely, I want to co-sign that final piece that Annie mentioned with regards to how, people think when you graduate that somehow you're going to remember every rule from every subject that you studied. And, that's absolutely not the case. But I think one of the misconceptions about lawyers, which I think is honestly a larger misconception about society in general, is that, you check that one box and this is what you're going to do for the rest of your life, right? You have to sacrifice everything else because this is what you're going to do and that's it. And I enjoy the fact that I get to share that I'm not a traditional lawyer, because I do get to practice, right? And I have a practice, and I have clients who are texting me nonstop as I'm speaking to you now, right? So I get to represent and practice law. I also have a consulting business, so I get to be in schools, and I teach, K to 12, and, provide those services. And, I'm able to write books. Like, I'm able to do so many different things, and I don't feel like I had to sacrifice any of my passions, right? And I think a lot of people, like, whenever I talk to them about, going to law school, a lot of them would say, well, I want to be an author and I want to be a lawyer, so which one should I choose? And I'm like, well, who said you had to choose one, right? Like, you can do both.
On that, you can do both. Um, Also in class, Professor Celestion or Richard, he told us that I told him like I wanted to be a real estate agent, but I also was interested in law. But he said you could do both. Who's gonna sign those contracts? You could do it if you were a lawyer. So that is just important to always remember like your passions. And you could be a lawyer, but you can also be an author. You could be a lawyer. You can also do whatever else you're passionate about. So when he comes back, well, my next question is, what are the best steps for studying for the LSAT exam? Um, wait, Richard, are you there? Do you want to
I'm here.
continue? Do you want to continue on the common misconceptions?
Yeah. So first off, I apologize. I do literally like a dozen virtual workshops a day and never freeze. And it's only because I'm doing this that it's freezing. So I apologize. This is just like my amazing luck. Yeah, so you don't, in terms of becoming a lawyer, you don't have to sacrifice any of your passions. You can do multiple things as a lawyer. You can practice law and do other things. You don't have to be in a courtroom, as Annie mentioned, all day. You don't have to sit at a desk all day. If you have a passion for working with youth, you can find a way to do both. It's certainly possible to do that. So that's definitely, my piece. And then I'll jump into I know you were asking about the LSAT, so I'll just answer that real quick and pass it to Annie. But yeah, in terms of studying for the LSAT, I think that one of the first steps that students really need to do is understand how they study and then plan from there. I am not somebody who enjoys studying through computers, electronics. I like physical books. I want to hold a pencil. I will write on paper. So that's me. So taking an online course and studying stuff through computers and stuff like that was not something that I was a fan of. I also knew that with practice, the more you practice, the more you can understand things, right? The LSAT, I know the logic portion of it. I mean, we've all done reading comprehension for a very long time, right? And the logic piece, the way that I explain it to people is that there's only so many ways they can ask the same question. And so it's not about seeing, they're using colors in this example and flowers in this one. It's not about that. It's about mastering the process to approaching how to answer that question. And as long as you understand the process, you can apply it in almost any situation that's presented to you, so that way you can efficiently move through the LSAT. And again, the best way is through practice and practice and practice. If you're in a position to take a course, I would definitely suggest doing that. I would also suggest looking into scholarships that are provided to students that can help to pay for courses, so you can study for the LSAT. And again, practice makes perfect.
I would agree with everything that Richard said. I would say, to add on, like, give yourself enough time. This is not something that you can, just throw in there and not study for. It is something that almost when you get close to the test, like, feels like it is a full-time job. I was someone who was able to self-study for the SAT, and that was fine for me. And I tried to do the same for the LSAT, and it did not work. And it was not it was a harder test than what the SAT was for me. And so I had to take a course. And so really being able to have someone in real life explain that, explain the problems, explain where I was messing up, because oftentimes you're messing up on the same types of questions. So really being able to internalize, like, I'm getting this question wrong. Why did I get it wrong? Not just saying like, oh, this is the right answer, I see. It's like, why did I get this question wrong? And how can I make sure it doesn't happen again? My instructor for like the LSAT would always say like because I would always say like, oh, I feel like I've mastered the test, but I just ran out of time. And it's like, well, then you haven't mastered the test, because that's the whole, like, you only master the test once you've gotten the grip on time. And there are going to be, time was definitely something that that I struggled with for a very long time. So it's really about figuring out how to master the time, and that's where, as Richard said, like the practice comes in, like, and really practicing under test like conditions. There are plenty of like previous LSAT exams that are out there, and so use those questions, use those tests, and use whatever resources that you can gather and find, whether it's a class or whether it's a self-study trainer or any of those things, to really set aside enough time and enough hours in the day at a time where you're energetic to study. And it's definitely a crunch, especially if you're working while you're studying, or if you're in school while you're studying, all of those things. So if you can take advantage of summer vacations, being a teacher was especially helpful for that reason, because I had a summer to study for the LSAT that was off, that was paid. So that was definitely a huge advantage as well. But all of the things that I mentioned and Richard had mentioned, I definitely would say are important for the LSAT.
We have another question. Hello, I would like to know which majors are the best for law school. I am a sophomore majoring in political science with a business minor, and I'm now considering adding accounting as a minor. Mr. Richard, can you test that?
Yeah. So again, I certainly understand everybody who goes down the political science route, because I think that that's what traditionally we're told. The way that I approach advising people in terms of thinking about majors for law school is to research some of the more commonly used skills that lawyers have and connecting majors to those skills. So something like psychology for me was a no-brainer, because part of, as a lawyer, what we do a lot is we deal a lot with people, right? And so understanding psychology and human interaction is really important. Philosophy is another massive, amazing major in terms of understanding logic and reasoning. Is something I highly recommend. English is a given. So that's another one that's really good. I think for people that are interested in law and government or considering politics at some point, I think that I'm certainly not discouraging anybody from taking political science. But I think from a strategic standpoint, when you're applying to law school, you have to remember that you're probably one of thousands of students that are probably going to have a political science major. And so in order to stand out and to make yourself a little bit more marketable, you want to have that either a minor or a double major. And again, focusing on those skills that will basically make you a more proficient going into the LSAT, going into law school, and then just thinking about the profession at the end.
They're dropping gems. I hope you guys are taking notes. Annie, would you like to answer the question?
Yeah, and just to add on from the perspective of like, what majors have I seen as a law student now? Like, there are people who have studied biology who are in law school because they want to go on and become patent lawyers. There are people who might have been theater majors or, in the drama realm of things because they may now want to become entertainment lawyers, and that's how they put their spin on it. And so like, study what it is you truly want to study, because they're like, if the interest is there, like as long as it forms a narrative on your application that makes sense as to why you now want to go to law school, I think like, that's what people really care about, or that's what admissions officers might be looking for. And as I said before, like, they're also looking for high grades. And so like, if you're taking a certain major because you think that's what you're supposed to do, but you are not doing well in it, and it's partially because you're just not invested or the readings are boring, like, and you're just not retaining that information. Like, it might be in your better interest to study something that you actually find interesting, that comes naturally to you, or comes easier to you, like through with hard work as well. I'm not saying any particular major is easier. I'm saying like sometimes it genuinely is easier to study something that you're interested in. And so when you do that, like, you end up with higher grades, which is exactly what law schools are looking for. So study what it is you want to study. That's not to discourage anyone from studying political science, if that is genuinely what you want to do. But there are so many different areas of the law, and there's so many different reasons that people go to law school, that you should not feel attached to one major.
I have a follow-up question. How important is to be different from your classmate? Like those applications, how important it is for you to have put like clubs on it? How important is that?
So yeah, I'm very big on marketability and branding and separating yourself from the pack. Playing chess when other people are playing checkers. I tell people that all the time. You probably heard that in the class before, Milton, too. So I genuinely believe that there are a lot of ways to kind of boost your resume, to boost your cover letter, to boost your experiences that may make up for an Lsat score that's not the highest in the world, or a GPA that's not the highest in the world, but you demonstrate that you have a wealth of experience and insight and knowledge that you can contribute to your fellow classmates, during the law school process. So I always encourage people to build your resume, do community service, join the clubs, take leadership roles in clubs. Don't just, go to clubs so that way you can attend the parties and kind of hang out. Get involved in your community, build.
I can follow up and echo just the importance of leadership positions, being something that helps you stand out. And I'll also speak to the personal statement as well. It is important to stand out, like in a way that's authentic to you. For me, like, I was very, like, the Black community at Harvard and undergrad was very important to me, and I wasn't going to downplay that. And so being president of the Association of Black Harvard Women, like, that was like the leadership experience that I took on. And so I definitely think having that on a resume helped a lot. And I definitely think, that the reality is also you're balancing having a full-time job. I mean, not a full-time job, but you're balancing having a job on campus. I had a job while I was on campus. And, you're balancing a full course load, a job, and then leadership responsibilities. They're not going to be a ton of things on your resume, but if you choose the things that make sense, that tell a story, that tell a narrative, I think that's what's most important. Grades and a high LSAT score are going to help you stand out the most. But really being able to be true to your experience is also important. I want to speak to the question about the personal statement and how important it is for the law school application. I would say every component of your law school application is so important. And I think people often overlook the personal statement, but it can definitely be the thing that, like, sometimes even, I'm not an admissions officer and I've never been on that end of the spectrum, so I actually don't know fully what they're looking for, but I have a feeling like, based on my own experience or based on experiences of people who I've helped through the application process and seen them on the other side, that it is something that can often make up for what may not be the strongest grades or what may not have been the strongest LSAT score, in the sense, it's an opportunity to show your writing skills, which in law school, you will be doing a lot of reading and writing. And so it is an opportunity to show your writing skills. It is an opportunity to show your voice and a little bit of who you are. It is an opportunity to explain, most importantly, why it is you want to go to law school and why the school should pick you over the thousands of other applicants that they have with the same LSAT score, higher LSAT score, higher GPA. And so for me, I wrote about my why. Like why was it so important for me to go to law school? What are the experiences that I had? And a lot of that I drew upon my experience teaching, and some of the injustices that I saw for kids in the classroom at the school that I was teaching at. And so I would say the personal statement is something you should definitely take time to think about. And it should not be like, I've always wanted to be a lawyer because I saw them like being lawyers on TV. Like it has to be like, why at this very moment in time, at this very point in your life, with everything that's happening, like why is it that you need to be a law student? Why do you need to be a lawyer? And why do you need to be a law student at this particular school that you're applying to? I think are all important things to think about and weave into your personal statement.
Thank you. Richard, would you like to continue your thought before you?
Yeah, no, I'll jump into the personal statement piece. So I agree that, personal statement is incredibly important. And I think the things to showcase in the personal statement is, as Annie mentioned, what is your motivation for going to law school? Because I think, law schools want to know, what do you bring to the table and what are you going to do when you earn a degree from our law school? How are you going to represent us? And I think the other piece that they want to know is that you're going to encounter a lot of obstacles in law school. What is going to keep you motivated and focused and continue to push forward? So what is your driving force? What's going to keep you centered and focused and get you through all these obstacles that you're going to be facing in law school?
Thank you. I guess you have a former student on your that was on your debate team. See those connections. But also my last question, leave it up on a positive note. What was your best moment you had in law school or studying law during undergrad?
So first off, Medina, hi. I hope you have my contact information. Definitely reach out to me. I'd love to hear what you're up to. My email is rcelestionllc@gmail.com. But yeah, so I think the greatest moment I had in law school was in my my third year of law school. We had a clinic, and I was in the criminal defense clinic, and I represented my very first client ever. And I was able to, I mean, when I tell you my professor, I went sleepless nights preparing for what seemed honestly like 30 seconds of standing in front of a judge to do a criminal court arraignment. And I was able to get my client out. And I remember driving back to the law school. I had my professor and my classmates, and we got out of the car. And there was such this amazing sense of just joy that we were able to help somebody out, that I blasted music in my car, and we were all dancing in the parking lot with our professor like 7 o'clock at night, just kind of like celebrating, this amazing hurdle we were able to overcome and being able to help and represent my first client ever. So that was by far the most memorable moment. I wish I could show you the goosebumps I just got from sharing that story. That's how much it still impacts me. To me, it was like, this is one of, I'm hoping for countless number of people that I will be able to help. And I was just so excited and thirsty for more.
Annie, you also have a question. Any advice for undergrads finding legal internship? Do you know any available? So that question and the best one. Sure.
I'll answer the question about the most exciting or best moment, because it's like very similar to what Richard just mentioned. Last semester, I was in the immigrant rights clinic. We had a client who was filing for asylum, and basically like the whole process from start to finish up until her asylum interview, like many sleepless nights, writing, preparing her for the interview, all of those things. And it was truly the most rewarding experience I've had in law school. It is a lot of work. And it is, not the traditional class, that you're like raising your hand or doing a cold call. Like it calls on different skills. And it really just reaffirmed for me like, oh, like I am like, you know, being a little baby lawyer and it feels good and I'm really excited about this work. And so it was reaffirming in that way of like, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and this is what I will be doing, and I'm excited about that. So everyone I've ever spoken to, when I ask like, what was the best experience that you've had in law school or class you took, their answer always goes back to a clinic. So remember that now, and you know, do some sort of clinic. Think about the clinics at the law schools that you will ultimately go to, and really like lean into those experiences. Any advice for undergraduates finding legal internships? Do I know of any available? I don't know of any available off the top of my head, but advice I would say is to think about, like it will, especially for undergraduates, require, because a lot of places like to focus on having law school students as their interns, because there's certain things that you can do as a law student that you've already been taught that might help them. But I do think of places, a lot of times you find the internships as an undergraduate through those connections, or through even like cold messaging or asking for a coffee chat to build that connection to begin with. So I would think about, what are some places that you would be interested in learning more about? And I say this all the time, like any organization or institution like has a legal department or has to have a legal department in some way. And so like think of companies or think of businesses or think of organizations or research them, and find a point of contact and just, you know, put your name out there, potentially slide a resume, make sure it's good, and just say, or just ask them like, I'm interested in learning more about your job, because I'm interested in going to law school. And I think that might be an opportunity to at least get your name in the door, because when the time comes and they might be thinking, oh, like I remember I met this person, let me reach out, or something like that. I think it's definitely important to basically, to sum it up, to do research, think of organizations that you might be interested in, do research on them, try and find a point of contact, and just reach out for an informational interview, to just ask if they have some time to talk about their role and their experience and any advice that they might give to an undergraduate.
Wow. I would like to thank everyone for being here. I would like to thank the people for joining. I would like to thank also our speakers, Mr. Celestion and Miss Annie. I would also like to thank the creators of this event, the Center for Career Engagement Internships, and also the Office of Student Development and Leadership. And I would like to also thank myself for being an amazing host. Thank you all for being here. Before we go, can you share your contact information if they got further questions, where they can reach you, Instagram, email?
Yeah, so you can reach me at EOP2105 at columbia.edu, for email. Also, an easier way to remember, Instagram is the thing that I do, and I also talk a little bit about law school. So if you just send me a DM at Any Given Sunday, that's ENI Given, GIVEN, Sunday. Absolutely feel free to reach out, send me a DM. I love to talk to people and help them through the application process to the extent that I can. So definitely reach out there as well.
Awesome. And the best way to reach me is by email. My email is rcelestin, my last name, CELESTIN, LLC@gmail.com. I have a bunch of other websites and all this other stuff, but email is definitely the best way to reach out to me. And please, when you reach out to me, mention that you participated in this event, just so I have some context in terms of where we encountered each other. So thank you. And I definitely want to thank Annie for the amazing information that was provided. Melton, you are the greatest host that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. So thank you for that. And thank you to everybody for setting up an amazing event.
Again, thank you for our guests. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for the creators of this event. Also, fill up those spaces. I will say it again, fill up those spaces. And with that, thank you.